my dear friend Mark Ryan Rees, and I'm Prof Z, and today we're going to be talking about owning a marine tank.
Because it's something that puzzles me, and I think it's really cool, and I don't know how it works, and it fascinates me. I don't even know how you get the water into a marine tank.
And it is absolutely fascinating to own a marine tank, and specifically what I do is a reef tank, although with Power Lab you can buy both a marine tank and a reef tank.
Wait, so a reef tank would be like the kind of fish and coral and stuff you find in a reef when you go snorkeling?
Yes.
And a marine tank would be, you put like tuna and shark in there?
To an extent, yes, to an extent. But look, I think the terms are used differently in different countries. But the way I see it, just seeing that you use the term, a marine tank typically would be a fish tank with saltwater fish. And a reef tank would be the same, but we'd be building a complete coral ecosystem within that aquarium.
Okay, but you still have fish inside the reef.
But you still have fish because coral reef fish are an important part of a coral reef ecosystem.
But the feature is the coral.
But well, again, it's a bit debatable because I would say it's the ecosystem is the main feature,
okay.
and they're all intrinsically connected. But some people would say like they prefer the fish over the coral. Most people end up saying they prefer the coral over the fish. But I wouldn't suggest that you have a reef tank with no fish.
Do people get upset when you call it a fish tank?
People that have reef tanks, I think they get upset.
Yeah.
I think they get.
And I think that's really cool because I didn't know that the coral... Look, I'd see reef tanks, I'd see fish tanks with coral in them. I didn't even know the coral was real. I thought they would just be like little plastic decorations people would buy from the pet shop and put inside the tank.
Yeah, yeah. So I think like for people that are considering starting a reef tank, the goal is really to engineer that ecosystem completely from the bottom up within the confines of an aquarium. And it really starts with the sand. So we put sand in the aquarium, and this is a specialized sea sand basically, and it performs both biological and chemical functions. So for example, the sand disintegrates with time or dissolves, and as it does so, it releases beneficial elements into the water like calcium and buffer compounds which help stabilize the pH of the aquarium. And also there's an entire sand ecosystem of worms and bugs and little starfish that develop in there.
Now a reef has got currents though. I mean that's one of the things that makes it a reef.
Yes, so...
and then you've got the sand.
Correct.
Doesn't the sand get churned up and make a mess and cloud?
So in the beginning it does. Often the sand can blow and it exposes the glass bottom. But with time the bacteria and worms and stuff start to bind it, and then it gets less sort of mobile almost. And both those components, the sand and the wave makers, are included in the Power Lab Aquarium packages, which I'll talk you through in a minute.
So the worms,
yeah.
Do the worms just come naturally, like they're with the coral and in the sand already, or do you actually buy worms and get worms and introduce them into the tank?
So a combination of both. In some countries you can buy what is called live sand, and it's sand that's packaged out of the ocean with the worms and stuff ready. But for most countries, and also some people prefer starting off with a synthetic sand, and then we start to add those microbes and macrobes into that environment. And the biggest way that we add life into the sand bed, as we call it, is using live rock, which is rock that comes out of the ocean. And that's embedded with all sorts of living organisms, and many of them move from the rock into the sand.
And the water? So I mean, there are people with reef aquariums who don't live by the sea, so they can't go down with like a 5-litre empty bottle and a bucket and collect water to take home to their aquarium.
Absolutely. So because of the convenience and because it's a lot safer, we use what we call synthetic water. So we purify tap water or fresh water, and then we add a salt formula to that. And when you mix the two, you have seawater. And again, the live rock that is added to the tank will distribute biomass or living organisms that will eventually then live in that water. and make it alive as well.
That sounds like a lot of stuff you need to get a tank. I mean, there's the sand, there's the special water, then you need the corals, you need a current, and you need
Yes.
it's a lot of things.
So I think my business has been very successful is that it's been able to make that lot of things simple to understand and simple to operate. So the way we explain it is that there are two spheres to a reef tank. The one sphere would be what we call the life support system, and the second would be the ecosystem. So the life support system would firstly include the tank and the cabinet. It would include the lighting, then the wave makers, and the filtration system, which is usually kept in the cabinet below. And the filtration system in turn is made up of a few components. So in the old days, if you wanted a reef tank, you'd have to go buy all those components individually after researching and reading and speaking to people. But then 15 years ago, Power Lab came along and said, well, why don't we just pre-design this whole thing and make it user-friendly so that people could just go, hey, I like a reef tank, and we could say, okay, cool, here you go. So we've thought through, you know, the whole process, and we've put all that stuff. So it's quite simple for you to take on a reef tank without having to go through all of that.
So it's just all the hardware in one tank, and then I've got to get the fish and the corals, and that's it, and plug it in.
As simple as it sounds, yes.
Really?
That's the level that we've taken it to. And we didn't just stop there. So over the last 15 years, we've, like, one of the filtration components, a key filtration component is what we call a protein skimmer. And it's used to do exactly that, remove proteins from the water.
How does that work?
In principle, it's a cylinder, and water gets pumped through it with little air bubbles, and the waste material dissolved in the water sticks to the bubbles, and they froth up. It looks almost like the ocean on a foamy day.
Oh, okay.
And then that gunk gets collected in a cup, which you just rinse in.
Is it because when you said protein skimmer,
Yeah.
I thought that it was like a euphemism for poo.
Well, that's exactly what it is.
Oh, okay.
It's taking the fish poo and a wee out of the water.
That's what the protein is.
That's essentially what it is, yes.
You could,
So what I wanted to say was that not only did we think about putting everything together to make it easy for somebody to own a reef tank, but we also thought about how we could improve the products themselves. So getting to your protein skimmer, that process we've made easier, where it sits in the filter system, how to tune it, you know, because it's a lot like a car engine. It needs to be set just
makes
correctly.
bubbles, puts air in like a carburetor.
Pretty much. So
Yeah.
like we've basically designed a skimmer that's preset on the factory side.
Okay.
So you don't have to sit and adjust, and then it's overset and then underset, and it's awkward to get the thing out, and the bubbles go splashing in your cupboard. So we've thought all the little processes through so that when you take the thing home, you don't need to be an engineer to operate the product. You simply plug it in, switch it on, and wash the protein out once a week. But we've refined all the products in the same way, you know, to the point that we make our own plumbing system, we make our own drainage system, and it's all about making it easy for somebody that's never had a reef tank before.
I guess it's like cars. You know, you get those people that like those classic cars, and they like to tinker with them.
Yeah.
And then you get people who just want to buy a car or a laptop. That They don't want to understand how it works, and they don't want to tinker with it.
Yeah.
It's like, man, I just want to drive the thing.
Yes, and that's exactly who we try and focus on. People who say, I'm not the engineer, I'm not the biochemist, I'm not the scientist, I just want a beautiful reef tank at home. And I think that's where our brand comes in. Although we do have a small division which we call our GT range, which are for the tinkerers.
Okay.
So we give you like a tank and a cabinet, and everything after that's up to you. So you could bring in other brands, lights and pumps, but it's not our main focus. So again, there's the life support system, and I mean, we've made it easy to the point that it even has a multi-adapter, you know, a power supply.
Yeah.
It has
because you need the lights, you need the pump.
Yep.
Is there anything else?
Light, the pump, the heater,
Okay.
the other little filter components,
Yeah.
the protein skimmer.
Okay.
That all gets plugged in. So we've
Oh, that makes bubbles.
correct?
basically.
The main filter. So we've given you all of that, the sand,
Yeah.
the salt, a purifying agent to decontaminate your tap water. It's all in the package.
And then the consumables such as the the salt and I don't know what else do you put in there.
Well, the salt is all included. Then everything that ties in with the ecosystem side, that gets sold separately. So when you get your fish, you'll need some fish food. When you get your corals, you'll need some.
Or they turn on each other.
Well,
putting more work for the protein skimmer.
we generally advise clients along so that they don't have fish that are going to turn on each other.
Forming factions on different sides of the...
What's interesting is that it does happen. There's a lot of personality in these fish. So there's definitely what we call the alpha fish, and he's the boss of the tank, and then they develop a pecking order. But we advise clients a lot, which brings me to the point that when we do add fish, most of the time we're adding fish that perform a certain function in the aquarium.
Not just looking good.
No. So all the fish almost that you could add to a reef tank are very beautiful, but we're more sort of selective about things. So we have fish that we add that consume algae. That's always a big part of why it is that we add fish. And we add fish that eat parasites of the corals. We also add fish that eat parasites of other fish. So there's always a function and a purpose behind the fish that we add.
What kind of parasites do you get on corals? Are they like?
So there's worms that can often affect coral, little crabs, little spider-like organisms, which is why it's important to quarantine animals before adding them to your aquarium. But of course, within South Africa, for now only, we also supply coral and fish.
It's like that movie, I think in the 90s, Arachnophobia, where the bananas came in from some equatorial place and there were spiders.
Yes, so it can happen like that, which is why again in South Africa we offer corals that we farm ourselves essentially. And
so you know that they're clean.
Absolutely. So they go through very stringent checks, and the way we manage their growth and observe them, we ensure that at the very least we're largely limiting the potential for these parasites to go. So to close off, for people watching this video, I'll say that what makes Power Lab Aquariums cool, I guess, is that they make it easy, and they make it simple, and they make reef keeping affordable. And what we do is we make owning a marine tank and all the parts associated with that process, we make it about the end user's experience. So it's simple. Yeah.
Okay.
So I've been Prof Z and
Mark Ryan Rees.
And tune in the near future, because I hope to invite you back, Mark.
Oh man, it'll be a pleasure. It's always good seeing you.
And,
he feeds me well.
And Mark and I
we had cinnamon buns.
And Mark and I will be talking about you owning a reef tank.